Before we begin, if this resonates, please like, subscribe, and share. Portals is devoted to exploring where the future is emerging and how we can consciously co-create the evolution now arising in humanity. Join our gatherings and add your voice to this shared inquiry. Together, we can explore the big questions of our time. Welcome to Portals of Perception and to the Universalis project, episode 30. Karen Kyriaki, welcome.
Greetings, Aviv and Kyriaki. That's number 30. That's wonderful.
Hello, Aviv. Hello, Karen. Great to be with you.
Our working title today is The Search for Truth, Love, and Life. So it can't get much bigger than that as a working title. And what I want to try to do is I want us to try to capture a thread that actually led us into the Universalis project from even before we formally launched it as a Universalis conversation. And I'll bring a slide in a minute from a conversation with Jeff Vanderkloot that was recorded exactly 4 years ago, October of 21, was published on April of 22, but was recorded back then, where we started to talk about the Universalis awakening and emerging and coming into life. And I'm going to try and bring a thread from that and then capture a thread that we explored on Universalis 12 and Universalis 14, and then lend it into something that's emerging in the last couple of weeks as the furtherance of that exploration. So how about that as a big picture plan for today? Sounds good by your note. Okay, great. Great. And by the way, I didn't say it, but I'm obviously not in my typical setting, back in Helsinki for work in the coming week. The exciting life of an international consultant. And there's something enchanting for me being back in Helsinki, different season, and still I'm enchanted by the nature of the place, the nature of the people, and let's see what is ready to accompany us this time on this adventure. So let me bring this slide and get us going, and then I'll bring your voices as we continue the exploration. So the Universalis project, episode 30, the search for truth, love, and life. And so this is where I'd like us to begin. This was maybe the first slide on portals where we used Universalis. And at the time, 4 years ago, so about, I think, a year before we formally launched the project, maybe more than a year. At the time, that's how I attempted to describe it, with the idea of becoming a whole person Universalis human, and actually described it as the Homo evolutus and Homo connectus cultivation fields. And there was a curious line that led me into it. I felt that I wanted to approach and describe some elements of shadow work, but I actually wanted to put it in a much broader context. And part of my concern at the time was that I felt that both development and spirituality in several places has been largely psychologized. Shadow work became very popular in the second decade of the 21st century through different lanes and different frameworks. And my feeling, my intuition was that it has tremendous value and importance, the study of integrating parts of ourselves that we left behind, but that it became, in some places, like the answer for everything, and the answer for development, and the answer for spirituality. And I felt that now that would be a limiting perspective. So what I attempted to do in the conversation, this conversation with Jeff van der Kloot, was to honor and appreciate the validity and the importance of shadow work, and actually walking there through three categories of shadow, and demonstrating in each one of them a story and an example, for instance. But then what I did was, even before going there, I said to Jeff, I want to place shadow work as one of the cultivation fields out of many more. So that's a conversation before the 1,000 faces of a Universalis human. And I think what's interesting for us to reflect on is how much of this actually we unfolded over the last 3-4 years and became part of the project. Anybody tracing through the work will find that we have attended to this idea that there is cleansing work, sublimation work, self-absolvement work, and forgiveness work that's adjacent to shadow work, okay, but stands on its own. And I feel that there is more work for us to open and unfold in that category. And a third category right next to it, which we have attended to quite a bit, is this idea of releasing blockages, releasing stop situations, releasing and disarming shrinkage reflexes, and the whole range of self-imposed limitations. And again, my sense was there's got to be a way to expand the playing arena and include these, and then that there is a whole body of work around energy management and self-regulation and balancing work. And we are attending to this quite a bit with the I-How endeavor. I think we touched this in a couple of places also in our dialogues, in our explorations, the Universalis explorations. But we are going deep into this in the I-How work. And then the other spaces that I brought up were, well, there is a whole work to be done about updating the sense-making maps of how each one of us, how we see the world. And that has been quite a significant element of the Universalis project, especially when we attended to endeavoring to tell the story of the epoch in and through multiple lenses, the 5 stories, the 7-fold natures of the epoch. These were in many ways traces to help us update the maps with which we make sense of this epochal moment. And then added to it is certainly something that has been quite major for us in the Universalis work, everything that is to do with inquiry-based perception seeking. So we have explored this idea of permanent line inquiries and the multiple pathways to seek perception and the new ways of knowing. So again, what is fortifying in this is seeing for me how much of it was seeded in the very beginning that I was not conscious of, I was not aware of. I keep describing this journey as a journey in which we are led, including myself, we are led into this through the unconscious. The journey is wiser than me. It informs how it wants to unfold. And this is not inside the category of what some will describe as channeled work, because I addressed the difference between channeling and agentic, self-responsible, inquiry-led, soul, spirit attuned, inner lives, blessed, permanent line inquiry, which is what I'm describing. It's not that I'm surrendering to another entity to inform us. Rather, it's that the intelligence that the inquiries we placed before ourselves summon develops its own momentum and reveals the next step of the journey as we unfold. And so together with it also we mapped in several places the significance and the importance of values work, virtual development, character formation. As again, this was an early mapping of what I imagine we would need to attend to unlock, to liberate the prospects of the evolutionary and connective possibility of a universalis human, which I felt called at the time to coin the idea of Homo evolutus and Homo connectus. And right next to it, capacity building. So this has been an important element of the Universalis journey we've been on, and we have addressed on several occasions the calling, the summoning to attend to the new, the latent and also the novel new capacities that are coming online, and to inside it also embrace new perspectives about resilience, endurance, and mental toughness. So, and the other four cultivation fields were self-authoring, self-leadership, purpose work, right? Featured in several of our conversations. And alignment practices, the whole sense of that is actually part of being an agentic human. We get to choose, we get to author our alignment and attunement practices such that we do not abdicate responsibility. That feels still a very important domain of awareness to come back to, even more so inside the intensification of indigo and violet that has been building over these last few years, because just being human on this planet at this time, you are being, from the moment you open your eyes, and sometime before you open your eyes, you're being pulled in many different directions. And there is here a recognition that we each get to take responsibility to our alignment choices and practices. And then central to the entire endeavor has been the contemplation and meditation practices. We demonstrated a variety of pathways, including Universalis 15, when we went deep into the form of a circle meditation and opened the pathways that accompany us there. And the last one that I named here was devotional and connection work, of which again we've described in many ways. So I felt that it would be appropriate to just for a minute bring this on screen before we lead into where we are called to explore today, because it's a backward reflection that puts in context where we are leading into today. Let me just pause here and see what, if anything, this brings up for you.
Well, it is indeed amazing how much was already seeded at that early stage, and how we already have, in a way, enlivened some of the boxes through the journey. And what comes alive now is that all these are interconnected, and sometimes they work like a domino effect. The one causes the other. Like if you cleanse deeply something in yourself, it creates space, it brings balance, it updates the way you look at the world. It then maybe raises new questions. You become it attracts some essence values and so on. So they work like in a dance, the one with the other. Yeah, it's amazing how this was already seeded at that early stage.
Yes. Yes, even when I knew very little about where and how it will open. So in that sense, it's a validation. Yes, please, Karen.
Yes, I can concur. It's a wonderful interplay between a human life and everything that it is connected to. And the one that particularly sung to me this time was the updating the sense-making maps of how I see the world. Because again, so much is to do with context, and this is the whole loom is contextual. But I think with this particular box, there's such an extraordinary journey of expansion to do with the way a human can perceive the evolutionary journey of humanity through these new ways of looking, these new sense updated maps, and the individual journey as well. So these are all like seeds that have opened into a wealth of extraordinary perceptions and understandings.
It occurs to me that what this conversation back then was a petition, was an invitation for some that has found us since. And I'm now able to recall that when I created this slide to walk through this with Jeff, the sense of it was these are some of the spaces a human being will naturally be called to attend to on the path, on the journey to unlock and liberate universal life. That is to say, if you want to be a fully engaged, whole person, universalis human, you need to attend to the cleansing work. You need to attend to releasing blockages and stop situations. You will need to attend to your energy management and self-regulation such that you are able to be fit for whatever job you are being called to perform. You need to do the updating of perspective and perception and sense-making maps as you are suggesting, Karen. You'll need to engage with inquiries and continue to review and reflect on the values that shape your choices and the character formation that you are continuing to refine. You need to attend to the latent capacities that are waiting to be activated. You need to do, most importantly, the self-authoring, self-leadership work, because to be admitted into full universal engagement, you can't enter that gate just as a member of a crowd. You need to become sovereign. You need to know in yourself and that whatever it is you seek to connect with and partake in, that you are taking responsibility and authorship. And because of that, you need to attend to your alignment practices, and all of it will call for contemplation, for meditation, and for devotional and connection work. So this is what these spaces invite. These are some of the territories, some of the spaces one will naturally be called to attend to on the path to universal life. And in some ways, I felt that we then brought some of it forward into Universalis 12 and Universalis 14. And since the Acropolis is in Kyriaki's backyard, you were able to offer us the vibrant living access to the historic significance of the kind of pilgrimage that people used to make to the place. And it served us as a way of describing both what the Acropolis was then and how perhaps we can contemplate about it today, the sense that it was a temple of connection and of gathering in communion to explore higher human possibilities and to abide with others at the edge of discovery and beyond. And that part of that was the sense that under various Acropolis that could be found in the ancient Greek culture, as Kyriaki informed us, there was always a theater and a healing place where healers and clairvoyants interpreted the dreams of patients. So what that led us into was the realization that there was a whole throughout cascading process that attended to the high, the middle, and the low in facilitation of what does it mean to be human, and that in a similar way, we would need to activate the full spectrum of engagement should we choose to bring to currency today the permission as human beings to be in pursuit in our time of the edge of discovery and beyond, which we proposed was for us in the sense of the Universalis endeavor, that the frontier, the Acropolis, one Acropolis frontier for us is discovering what does it mean to unlock the Universalis endeavor. And that led us into the further articulation of, okay, so what is Acropolis work? And we suggested that it involves prodding and exploring and researching into beyond the edge for connection, for understanding, and for communion possibility. That is to say, wherever I am, in whatever domain I engage, is there a way for me to seek to make contact with the essence, with the core of that domain, or with the higher causation of that domain, for which I need to expand beyond myself, or sometimes go very deep inside myself, and the two are not mutually exclusive, but rather come together, all of which is in the sense of activating the temple of our potential. So in the ancient context, they needed to travel to the Parthenon, to that Acropolis temple, to discover the place of communion. And we were suggesting that the currency of it today would be to seek to activate the temple within what we sometimes describe as the cathedral of the nascent Renaissance that's arising now, which is the human temple and our potential to and for releasing stop situations in service of the human cause and purpose. So we've then taken that work in Universalis 12 into the furtherance of it in Universalis 14. I'm just going to bring that, and then I'll invite your voices, because what we said then was we already said in 14, which was the journey to explore how we can decode the current of the epoch. That's what we did in Universalis 14. That's very much a way of searching to update our maps of meaning and maps of sense making, and an exploration to say, well, the epoch of transformative change is coming through humanity and is expressing itself in all the core domains, in leadership, in organizational design, in medicine, in healing, in education, in technology, in philosophy, in all the possible 40 or 60 or 100 or 500 domains of life and expression. And what the core premise there was that when anybody at any point in history lean into the leading edge of the domain they're pursuing, they will become attractive for something of that moment in time of the current that unfolds through the evolving epoch to inform them. And they may only get domain-specific set of insights, which is fine, it's still rich and profound and extraordinary. And what we said was the attunement, the alignment practices that we were bringing into this was a sense of needing to search for the core operating system that will arise to support the next 1,000 or 3,000 years of civilizational development, and if you like, the core compound set of ways and means and principles that could be relevant and supportive to all those different domains. So in Universalis 14, what I felt called to do was to name three critical categories, three critical spaces to attend to in that frontier. And we call them the Acropolis of me, the Acropolis of self, where we said the work is to do the releasing of personal stop situation, to search the unlocking of new connections, and to, through that, do the work to realize the endeavor to realize the evolutionary potential. Now you see why I brought the slide before, because so much of it was seeded before, and I only in retrospective trace realized that actually this work was seeded before we even launched the Universalis project. So that was the first space. The second was the Acropolis of many, the Acropolis of we, where in a similar way we are seeking to release our stop situations by unlocking the new ways of being and creating together, which is an essential core element of the evolution of humanity, because we cannot just evolve on our own. We can make some headways individually, but unless we evolve as groups, as networks, ultimately as a species, we're held back by the collective gravitational pull of consciousness. And it doesn't mean that individuals cannot make profound breakthrough in their communion work, in their connection. They can. But you are held back to an extent by the larger condition of the species. That's a very important realization. So the work of the collective is critical. It's not just novel and charitable. It's not something you do just for charitable reason. It's something you do because we are each part of the greater collective. And actually, the relationship between the work of self and the work of the collective of the many is that they unlock each other. They're totally intertwined. To realize our evolutionary potential as individuals, we've got to do this work collectively. And to do the collective work of realizing our evolutionary potential, we've got to each take on, to the degree that we choose, in the personal inclination that we bring to it, some more artistic, some more mental, some more in service and variety of roles and functions, and the 20 or 40 or 200 other personal expressions. And then there was one more space that became important to bring into it, which was the Acropolis of power. And the Acropolis of power in the sense of disarming the degenerative usage of power. And so what that pointed to was how humanity has been struggling from the beginning of time with this sense of how power is used, and all the many different layers of power. As I just speak to this, I realized that this still awaits us in the future. This is work we still need to come to and decode and name the different categories and different kinds of power that we suggest are part of that, and that we needed to find a way to release the human cause from the pecking order where all the power was aggregated with just few individuals. And humanity has gone through this time and again, and we seem to be entering a cycle once again where we're confronted with, is humanity ready to mature and ripen in the sense of distributing and liberating power in a regenerative and safe way, or power is once again going to be aggregated with very few people. We thought this was fully addressed and answered through the modern project. But as we entered the indigo-violet intensification, which we are describing, also has a regressive cycle in which it melts the establishment and the success of the blue modern operating system. We're being challenged as we can see now all over the world, with how mature are we as a species to manage distributed power safely. And we are in many ways going through the struggle that humanity is now experiencing, partly through this very aspect. Will we learn these particular lessons? And if we do, then generating power in service of human evolution is what we are ultimately called for. So when this slide was codified a couple of years ago, for example, it was in the background, but it wasn't so front and center how the AI revolution is galloping and asserting to itself and threatening to take a domineering power over humanity. So these again were suggested as the kind of spaces we will need to address if we are to be admitted into universal life, if we are to be safe for ourselves, for each other, and for the universe. So right there is safe for self, safe for others, and safe for the universe means you can manage power in a way that is not degenerative, will not inflict undesired consequences that can be inflicted with the usage of power. And what that essentially mapped here was a journey map that we will need to attend to if we are to be initiated more fully into universal life. So that is me rethreading and recapturing the thread, because where I'm going next is taking this very framing here and opening some further nuances and insights, revelations, if you like, perception, power in terms of what this invites. So let's see if there is anything you would want to offer just to the recapturing of the thread to this point before we go next to the next several slides.
Yes, looking at these slides and remembering really as they've been presented at different times as frameworks and as perceptions and understandings. And now, as you've retraced the journey, I can see how they're not frameworks and squares on a box, as it were. There is access into these different patterns and layers of revelation. And I can recognize how at different times, different ones have become potentized and connected with others and become alive. And individually and collectively, with friends and with groups, and how it's an evolving journey. You don't go from one to the next and you've got that new. It's the multiplicity of it is what I'm feeling now. I'm feeling the access, the multiplicity, the potency that is tangible. And then I'm also registering that this being live, current, pervasive across the planet, across the human race, what a wonderful opportunity there is if more of us can be working in these connective realms of potential.
Thank you, Karen. Please.
Yes, indeed, it's such a promise that is revealed through this loom and through this journey. And I want to say that really the exampleship of Acropolis, it's like a beacon to the ever after. Um, and I'm saying this not only because I'm a Greek, but no, because it was a time where actually these complexes, the Acropolis, were not just buildings that we visit today. They were actually systems and ecologies and conductive places. You can feel that a little bit sometimes if you go by night in an Acropolis, um, where very important questions were being asked about what is human life, how to refine one's character, how to become a temple of virtues. Um, and they were all working together. So there were people that were asking these core questions and bringing in new perceptions and elevations. All these philosophical schools that were active were doing that work. But on parallel, in these complex systems, there were people at the leading edge of art that were doing sculpture, were doing theater, were doing poetry. And they were also people doing athletics and perfecting the ability of the human complex, healers, scientists of the time, and a lot of also people basically evolving the governance systems and justice. So it was like a hub, a very active beehive of a lot of things going on, where these three levels were working in parallel. So, in a way, one was refining oneself, but through the collective in a co creative fashion. And that was causing ecologies that had healing potency, caused catharsis, caused connections. I don't want to idealize it, but of course there were a lot of um, not so right things, like the slaves, for example. But still, it was a very high attainment, and that's why I think it's valid to use the word Acropolis, because it combines the acro, which is the edge of things, and the polis, which is the being together. And being a good politis means you are part of the polis. You are not separate. You are part of the polis. So the polis is not something out of you, it's in you, because in a way you become one with it.
Yes. Well, thank you. You're both offering, Kiriki, you are bridging the significance of what was the origin story and original intent of those ancient Acropolis endeavors, and in a sense how that transmission is alive today, certainly in what we describe as her story. And Karen, what you offered was a sense that indeed these are not boxes on a slide, but rather those have become now vibrantly alive domain of awareness, sensitivity, conscious, intentional, individual and collective endeavor, where you have lives that are activated in relation to these different spaces. So that is for me a validation that what we're dealing with is not invention. It's not just somebody sitting in somewhere and making stuff up. Because indeed, as you offered, for me, looking at this, these are lens with which I'm looking at what's happening in the world today, what's happening in geopolitics, what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the organization I'm going to be helping this week when I work with executives and leaders, because perhaps not at the philosophical level and the frontier in the way we are exploring it, they are exploring their frontier, and different situations will need this to be customized, likely to a different language and to a different translation, which is quite all right. What this offer is a high-level mapping of the kind of challenge that humanity is confronted at this time. And so where that led us into today was that I've received a question once again, which was, well, the question generally said, what's the upside of working on personal stop situations and collective stop situations? Which it was very potent, and I instantly had a complete download in response to, because in some ways it was it reconnected to that thread or that concern that I had in the first place, which was that if we pathologize and overly psychologize the endeavor in what we sometimes describe as below the line, we narrow the range. And so I felt called to frame the work on releasing personal and collective stop situations inside a need to once again reassert what it is that we were trying to do here. And so the updated language that emerged with this was the sense that the Acropolis was an invitation into the realms of engagement with higher possibility. And the threshold spaces where the universe and the human and the universe and the human, interpenetrate and permeate with connective plasma and creative potential. So in this updating contemplation, I felt called to see the two sides of this parlay, the two sides of this conversation, the human and the universe. Of course, the human is part of the universe, so there are no sides. These are interpenetrating realms, which is exactly the point here. And yet, when we invite the sense of self-responsibility and agency, we do mean in that we each have the opportunity to, in the micro universe that we each are, take charge and offer an opportunity for the larger, the universe at large, to work with us. And that led to first holding that contemplation on the universe side, which is to say and recognize that the universe's enduring interest and desire is to bring the human into ever higher levels of engagement, connection, and communion, to invite the human into joining and partnering in universal affairs. Essentially, what this invitation, this contemplation invites us is to say, well, from the beginning of time, the universe has been seeking a partnering agency that's conscious of its consciousness. We call the sapient human, the evolutionary trace of a sapient human was actually sapiens sapiens is an evolutionary life that's conscious of its own consciousness, aware of its own awareness, being initiated, being trained to enter universal life, inside of which the human role within the universe is to help the universe become conscious of its own affairs. In essence, liberate, if you like, the universe from its unconsciousness into its consciousness. Liberate the universe from the loneliness of its initiatory first impulse of the first and the second Big Bang, waiting to receive the return echo Big Bang of consciousness through human participation. And that is the impulse in the universe. The universe longs for company, longs for conscious partnership, capable of recognizing and co-creating within its living intelligence the true potential of the universe. That is to say, all that we see in the material world is wonderful and great. It carries the latent potential of the larger latency of the universe that we are called to liberate from the physical and the biological all the way to the energetic and the spiritual, and that in a way describing that process is describing the Acropolis function in at least some part of its invitation. So as I felt called into this reframing of those invitations, those permissions in the sense of the Acropolis work, putting what I describe now as the universe side then invites what does it look like from the human side, which is where I was looking to ultimately address the question of, well, what's the upside? How do you tell a story or perceive the scenery of possibility when we deal with stop situations individually and collectively? Because from the human side, the opportunity is ultimately one of liberation of our higher capacities and possibilities. That becomes a very important framing, because what essentially it says is that what we looked again at before, the Acropolis of me, the Acropolis of self, is an endeavor to open up, to reveal the pathways of personal liberation. It is the work of personal liberation. That's what the work is about. It endeavors to emancipate the self into its higher coherence, higher connective freedom and possibility. So even as we deal with all that we struggle with the impediments of what blocks us and can be described as stop situations, well, we do this work exactly to unlock personal liberation. And in a similar way, the Acropolis of many, the Acropolis of we, is an endeavor to open, to discover, to unlock the pathways of collective and mutual liberation, which essentially is what we humans are meant to be doing together. We're not meant to block each other. We're not meant to control each other. We're not meant to subjugate each other. We are meant to, in the Universalis sense, afford each other the greater freedom that sometimes we can only actually discover when we come together. Freedom and liberation that we can't even attain by ourselves on our own, but we can access by the freedom that we offer each other, because it endeavors to release our shared potential into the co-creative, connective, and harmonious intelligence, which, again, the radical discovery is that what the we, what the collective, what the network significance is is we are each carrying a part of each person, that is, latent capacities. You are caring for me, I'm caring for you, we each carry for each other dimensions of possibility that we cannot unlock by ourselves, but we can unlock when we come together. Capacities of healing, capacities of perspective, creative capacities, because we come together and the larger arena affords us creative and connective powers that we cannot reach for on our own. So this is part of the epochal trace. We describe how from tribal earlier in the epoch, the journey through individuating to the significance of the individual, and ultimately in the universalis sense, I just said earlier today, we've got to come into it as agentic individuals, all to discover in a whole new way the significance of coming together, because some of the universalis theater of expression will only be validated, will only be found really inside a collective context. So now that felt important to go deeper into the sense of what it is that we confront when we do this work. So I'm going to ask Karen for you to do a voiceover on this as I unfold the slide, because what the previous slide attempted to do was to name that, yes, the work is work of liberation. When we deal with stop situations, the purpose is liberation. So let's just describe a little more of it. Please, Karen.
The liberating process. Naturally, as we enter these realms, what rises to the surface are the very conditionings that prevent liberation, which is why the work often involves disarming and releasing impediments, burdens, or difficulties. The purpose is not to solve problems, but to enable what solving and releasing these challenges make possible. We are not trying to fix the personal self, nor to fix the group system. We enter the Acropolis to facilitate personal and collective liberation.
So that's the fulcrum of the point we're making, and partly what I was called to address in this writing, because part of the observation and why I traced all the way back to that reflection on shadow work, because part of the observation of what was happening in broader society over the last couple of decades is that therapy became very popular over the last 3-4 decades, from the latter part of the 20th century. And that's partly why shadow work became very popular in many circles and many places all over the world. And which was great because it was part of the unlocking and the liberation. But partly what happened was that the two things, in a way, the deeper study and acceptance in broad society of the appreciation of trauma, in a way provided an alibi. Everybody could now use the story of trauma and personal trauma to explain everything. And it felt incomplete. It felt that trauma, in that sense, became a justification for too much, for all the problems, all that goes wrong in society. And a person could use that to explain everything. And it felt incomplete. There were other dimensions, there were other realms that we needed to attend to. And it also, the other thing it did was that it presented a trap. And the trap it presented, okay, so if I can do the work about what's broken with me, or if I can do the work about what I left in the shadow, or if I can do the work in the way we describe it, even in the Portals into the Soul work in chapter 2, where we attended to the idea of the ghost and we described the anatomy of separation events. And we describe the ghost as in even a broader frame than shadow, because what we describe there with the ghost is that the ghost is a compensatory act of the soul having been, the person having been separated from their natural soul inclination. The soul then creates a, an act that tries to emulate its original nature and configuration, but is actually not yet the fully tethered, the fully connected to its natural embodiment, and therefore present often an arrestation. So, but the trap that I'm now bringing to focus here is thinking that when we do this work, that is the purpose of the work, to fix the problem, to integrate the part, to over-psychologize the experience. And it was that which I attempted to address here by saying the purpose is actually not to solve the problem, but to enable what solving and releasing these challenges makes possible, which is the greater liberation of your capacity in universal life. It's a flying upside down perspective of the work. So therefore, because what we know is so very important with anything we do in life, it's the mindset or the mind frame or the mind flow we bring to the work we do that determines how we approach it. So if I go into the work thinking I need to fix myself, or we need to fix the group system, we are displaced from the purpose of the work. If we come into this work with the consideration that this is work that's important for us to do. We need to do the healing work. We need to do the release work. We need to do the disarming work. We need to do all these dimensions of the work to facilitate the greater liberation. Then we approach the work very differently. So please, Karen, I add one more piece here on this slide.
Inevitably, in that liberating process, we encounter and transform all that obstructs the higher joining. It is the liberation of our higher human capacities that opens the way to a fuller partnership with the universe.
Right. So that indeed is what occurs whenever you seek to reach for higher freedom, higher capacity. By definition, you will encounter all that stands in your way. And by definition, first of all, we encounter all that stands in our way in our interiority. All our inhibitions, all the areas where we contracted from the fuller range of the human we can be. Instead of being a piano that plays on 7 octaves, many humans live a life that plays on octave and a half, or only 1 octave, or only perhaps 1 or 2 notes. And if we are to unlock the fuller 7 octaves of human life, well, we'd need to encounter that. So this led then into this further realization. Please, Karen.
As clear and luminous as it is, it carries a risk that it becomes internalized merely at a conceptual or intellectual level. The Acropolis process is neither conceptual nor intellectual. It cannot be reduced to mental activity. It is experiential, participatory, and alive. A transformative current that works from the inside out.
Right. So this is the point you made, Karen, a few minutes ago when we visited a slide from the Universalis 14, when you said, I'm looking at it now, and I can see that we have access to it. It was initially words on a slide, but having engaged in a live way, in an experiential way, in a participatory way, in an artistic way, in your case and many times in Kiriki's case, in engaging the whole person, the multimedia nature that we each are, the more we do so, the more we unlock the living sense of it. But what I felt called to try to assert here is that what we covered on the previous few slides, you can read through this, somebody can join us and say, well, these are nice words, these are nice concepts, how do I know that it is for real? And so I felt that there was something else I needed to reach for. And what that was a search to describe the inner lives, the interior propelling life that inspires this kind of work, that inspires and powers doing the work on self, doing the work together with others, doing the work into the realms of power. And this is where it led. So please, let's read this.
To unlock the Acropolis is to realize the living integration of three propulsions. Three forces that, when unified, generate the conductive field through which higher possibilities become accessible.
Well, we've done it again. We attempted to do one large episode, but are discovering that we need to break it into two because so much came into this. So this is the end of Universalis 30, and the name for which is going to be more about liberation, to truly discover and appreciate why we described in the beginning truth, love, and life. You're going to have to come to Universalis 31. To be continued right there. Thank you, Karen and Kiriki. Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.